quietest moment of your life. It is not peace. And perhaps that's the first thing you need to accept, even if a part of you still tries to call it tranquility, because it isn't. If it were peace, you would feel light, but what you feel is not lightness. It's a strange absence. It's as if something inside you has been switched off, and it didn't happen all at once. It happened gradually, without warning, without a specific event, without a clear reason that you can point to. You only realized that which once motivated you no longer motivates you. What once captivated you no longer holds you. What used to distract you no longer fulfills your needs. And now, this space exists. That inner silence, which isn't exactly comfortable, but it's not chaotic enough for you to call it a problem. And that's exactly why it's so confusing. Because it doesn't have an easy name. It's not sadness. It's not desperation. There is no apparent crisis, but it's not peace either. It's a means, a strange place, where you can no longer find support in what once was, but it also still can't recognize itself in what's coming. And then thoughts arise that you might not even say out loud. Why does it seem like I've disconnected from life? Why does nothing captivate me like it used to? Why do I feel so much, and at the same time, it feels like I feel nothing? And you try to explain, try to rationalize, try to get back into the rhythm, try to convince yourself that it's just a phase. But deep down, you feel that something deeper is happening. And it does. But it's not in the way you've learned to recognize change. Because the change you're hoping for makes noise. She comes with a decision, with movement, with visible action. But the change you are experiencing now, it comes in silence. And this silence, it's not absence. It's a type of preparation that almost no one understands while it's happening. Because it doesn't show what's being built. It only shows what is ceasing to make sense. And that gives a feeling of loss. But it's not a loss. It's being removed. Removing everything that no longer supports who you are becoming. And if you stay here, you'll understand why this silence feels so empty. It is, in fact, the exact point where your reality begins to be reconfigured. Now tell me honestly, that silence you feel, does it calm you down or does it make you uncomfortable? Silence is not emptiness. It is an invisible collapse of your former identity. What are you experiencing right now? It is not an empty interval. It's a collapse, but not in the way you imagine. It's not an external collapse. It's not something that destroys your life on the outside. It's internal, silent. It's extremely accurate. The structure that is being affected, it's your identity. The way you recognize yourself, the way you reacted, the way you positioned yourself in the world. And it doesn't just disappear all at once. It's losing momentum. It gradually ceases to be self-sustaining until you start to realize that you can no longer be who you used to be naturally. And this is much deeper than it seems, because it's not a conscious choice. You didn't wake up and decide to change. It's simply, it doesn't fit anymore. You try to react as before, but it looks artificial. Try to get involved like before, but it doesn't hold up. Try to care like you used to, but something inside you isn't responding. And then comes the most confusing feeling. I think there's something wrong with me, but it doesn't have it. What is happening? The thing is, the old version of you is collapsing. And since the new system isn't fully structured yet, what's left is this space, this silence, which you interpret as emptiness, but it's not empty. It is the absence of an identity that can no longer exist in the same way. It's like you're inside a house where the old furniture was removed, but the new ones haven't arrived yet. The space is there, but that seems strange, incomplete, unknown, and that creates discomfort because human beings seek reference points. Try to find out where it is, who is it, how to act, and at that moment, those old references don't work anymore, and the new ones are not yet clear. And that's precisely why this silence exists. Because before building a new way of being, it is necessary to disassemble the previous one. And disassembling it It doesn't make any noise when it's internal. It only creates absence. And this absence, that's what you're feeling right now. His energy hasn't disappeared. It's been withdrawn from what no longer makes sense. And along with that silence, something is coming that might worry you even more. The feeling that your energy has disappeared, as if you had lost something. That disposition, that impulse, that ease of getting involved. And that makes you wonder, what's happening to me? Why can't I be like I used to be? But look more closely. You didn't lose any energy. You lost availability, for which it no longer makes sense. And that's completely different, because its energy still exists, but she no longer responds to the same stimuli. That which used to pull you in automatically. It doesn't have the same effect now. And that's not a flaw. It's a selection process. It's as if something inside you has changed the criteria. And he would say, silently, I'm not going to this anymore. And then you try to force it. Try to get into the rhythm. Try to force yourself. Try to recover what was automatic, but it doesn't hold up. Because it's not a lack of strength. It's a lack of alignment. Your energy is being preserved. Removal from places where it was previously wasted. But since you haven't yet channeled that energy into something new, the feeling that remains is one of absence. Empty, out of discouragement. But that's misleading, because it's not discouragement. It's a strategic pause. It is energy in a state of reorganization, and this generates a strong internal conflict, because your mind has been trained to associate energy with constant action. If you're not doing it, she interprets it as a problem. But what's going on here? It's deeper than that. You are failing to react automatically and beginning, without even realizing it, to select. And this selection, this is the beginning of real change. Even if, for now, she just seems silent. The mind goes on alert because it cannot control this process. There's a change happening inside you which doesn't follow any logic, and that, for the mind, is almost unacceptable. Because the mind was built to operate based on patterns. She understands repetition. She understands cause and effect. She understands visible progress. But what are you experiencing now? That's not the case at all. There is no clear step. There is no defined direction. There is no outcome that you can see. There is only one state, a silence, a slowdown, a lack of immediate response. And that makes the mind uncomfortable. Because for her, everything that cannot be controlled, this needs to be corrected. Then she springs into action, but not in an aggressive way. She enters subtly, almost imperceptible. She starts watching you, and to generate minor interferences. Thoughts that seem like your own, but which carry an air of urgency. You've been standing still for too long. This isn't normal. You need to get back to doing something. If things continue like this, we'll be left behind. And in the beginning, you don't even question it, because it seems logical. He seems responsible. It almost seems necessary. But if you look more closely, you will realize that these thoughts do not come clearly. They come with pressure, with mild anxiety, with a sense of urgency, without direction. And that's no coincidence, because your mind isn't trying to help you evolve. She's trying to bring you back to the familiar, even if what you know no longer works for you. Because for her, the discomfort of the familiar, it's safer than the emptiness of the unknown. And the silence you're experiencing right now, it is completely unknown. It has no reference to its past. You've never been exactly like this before. No desire to return, but also without clarity on how to move forward. No chaos, but also without enthusiasm. And this triggers a kind of internal alert. And then the mind starts to create quick solutions. She tries to push you into any kind of movement, anything that breaks this silence. Going back to old habits, keeping busy with things you've already overcome, seeking constant distraction, filling the time just to avoid feeling this way. And the most delicate part is that you almost accept it. Because deep down, this silence is unsettling. not because of the pain, but due to a lack of definition. And human beings have been conditioned to need definition, to know where it is, where are you going, what is happening. And when that doesn't exist, the tendency is to run away. But here's the point that almost no one realizes. Every time you run away from this silence, you interrupt a process that was going well, because this state is not random. He has a function. However, this function is not visible while you are trying to exit it. It only reveals itself when you sustain it. And sustaining that requires something rare. Do not react immediately to discomfort. Don't rush to fill it out. Don't try to go back to what it was. Just observe. Just allow it. And that goes against everything you've learned. That's why it's difficult. But that's exactly why it's transformative. You are caught between two versions, and that space feels like a void. Now comes the most profound part and more difficult to sustain emotionally. You are no longer where you used to be, but it hasn't reached where it's going either. And this between, it is one of the most unstable states that exist because he has no identity. You try to define yourself, but no definition fits completely. If you look back, he no longer fully recognizes himself in that version. What once seemed natural now seems distant. The reactions have changed. Perceptions have changed. Interests have changed. But if you look ahead, he also doesn't find anything solid. There is still no clear new structure. There is no new established identity. It's just a feeling. And that creates a very specific kind of discomfort. It's not pain. It's not intense suffering. It's a mismatch. It's like being in a place where nothing is wrong, but nothing really seems like yours. You live your days, but you don't feel completely immersed in them. You participate, but there is a subtle distance, as if a part of you was always watching from the outside. And this can generate a silent thought. I don't know who I am anymore. And that thought weighs heavily on me, because identity has always been a point of support. It was always what gave you direction. But now, this point is under reconstruction. And that creates a void, but not an emptiness of lack. A transitional void. It's the space between a version that has already been and another one that is still being formed. And this space is not comfortable, because he has no frame of reference. You can't be guided by the past, not even for the future. You only have the present. And the present is not yet fully defined. And that's exactly why your mind is trying to take you away from here. Because this state requires something that is not common. To sustain not knowing. To support the absence of a definition. Supporting the process without having to name everything. And that gives you the feeling of being lost. But you are not lost. You are in reconstruction. But unlike anything you've ever experienced, this reconstruction doesn't begin with action. It begins with deconstruction. With internal disassembly, by removing everything that no longer supports who you are becoming. And until this dismantling is complete, you'll feel it, this silence, this mismatch, this lack of a clear identity. But here is the most important point of all. This is not a mistake along the way. This is the way. And if you try to get out of this too soon, you don't evolve. You'll only come back. And to return after realizing, it's much more tiring. This silence is reorganizing your perception of reality. Something is happening to you that doesn't appear in your external life first. Change doesn't begin with what you do, not even in what you achieve, not even in what others perceive. It begins with how you see. And that's exactly what this silence is doing to you. He's messing with your perception. It depends on how you interpret everything. Because before, you reacted. Now, you watch. Before, you accepted it automatically. Now, you ask. Before, you went with the flow without realizing it. Now, you see the flow, and that changes everything. Even though on the outside, your life still seems the same. Because reality doesn't begin outside. It begins with how you perceive what is outside. And when that perception changes, it's only a matter of time before the rest catch up. But this time, that's exactly what this silence is occupying. He is adjusting his lenses, reorganizing what makes sense and what it no longer does, separating what is automatic of what is conscious. And that's a profound process because it messes with everything you believe to be normal, with everything you accepted without question, with everything you repeated without realizing it. And now you start to see, and seeing it changes everything, even if you still don't know what to do with what you're seeing. And this can cause discomfort, because seeing without acting immediately, it gives a feeling of stagnation, but it isn't. It's a process of maturation. It is the moment when awareness grows before the action is followed. And that's rare, because most people act without realizing it. You are noticing before you act. And this completely changes the quality of the decisions that come after. When the movement returns, it doesn't come from impulse. It comes from awareness. And then a moment comes where that silence begins to change shape. Not because you forced it, not because you ran off to do something, but because something inside you organized itself. And then, suddenly, the movement is returning. But it's not the same as before. He is not impulsive. He's not anxious. It's not automatic. It is clear. You start to feel the urge to do it. But not just anything. Specific things. Things that make sense. Things that seem aligned, even if you can't fully explain them. And that's different. Because before, you acted to fill a void. Now, you act because it makes sense, and that difference changes everything. Decisions become simpler. You don't need to think so much anymore, because there is an internal coherence guiding it. What was once a question, now it becomes a matter of perception. What used to be effort, now it becomes a flow, and not because it got easy, but because it was aligned. And this is where many people realize something for the first time. Life begins to respond differently. Not magically, but in a coherent way. Things are starting to fall into place better. The right people start showing up more naturally. The choices begin to generate less conflict. Because now, you're no longer trying to live in an old reality. With a new awareness, you are beginning to live according to who you have truly become. And this triggers something that many people call a manifestation. But in practice, that's a consequence of an internal state that finally found coherence with action. And all of this, it began in that silence that you almost tried to avoid. Conclusion: if you've made it this far, that's because this silence isn't strange just for you. You recognized it. At some point, you thought, that's exactly what I'm experiencing. And that changes everything, because now you no longer see that state as a problem. You begin to see it as a process that is not visible, but it's real. You are not standing still. You are not late. You are not lost. You are in one of the most important moments of your life, the one where everything slows down on the outside to reorganize itself internally. And perhaps you still feel discomfort. I still have doubts. I still want faster answers. But now, there is something different. Conscience. Have you noticed that this silence isn't meant to hold you back? It came to transform you. And that changes the way you experience it. Because now, you don't need to run away anymore. You can observe. It can hold up. You can trust us, even if you don't understand everything. And now I want to ask you something. But it's not just a comment. It's an internal recognition. If you feel you are in that quiet moment where nothing seems to happen on the outside, but everything is changing on the inside, comment here. I am in silence, but he comments with presence, like someone who has stopped resisting, and he began to realize, because that's where it is. So that change ceases to be confusing and begins to become aware. Once you understand, the silence is never the same again. There's one thing that changes completely after you recognize what is happening. The silence continues, but the way you relate to him changes. Before, you try to leave. Now, you start to observe. Before, it felt like a roadblock. Now, it's starting to look like space, and that changes the whole experience. Because what used to cause you anxiety, it is gradually beginning to generate clarity. Not all at once, but only at certain times. Brief moments where you notice something different. A cleaner way of thinking. A simpler decision. A feeling of, now this makes sense. Effortlessly. And you start to notice the silence wasn't holding you back. He was organizing you. But while you were resisting, it felt like a weight. When you start to allow, it becomes a structure. And here's something that happens that few people consciously realize. You start to trust yourself in a new way. Not based on external certainties, not based on validation, but based on what you feel and what you stand by. And that completely changes your relationship with life, because you stop needing everything to be clear, to continue. You learn to walk even without seeing everything. And that is inner maturity. The silent danger, trying to speed up what only happens in its own time. But there's a point here that you need to understand, because even understanding all of that, the mind is still trying to interfere in a more subtle way now. She no longer comes saying, this is wrong. She keeps saying, okay, I understand, so let's speed this up. And that seems like progress, but it isn't. It's impatience disguised as awareness, because you start wanting to get out of that state faster. He wants total clarity now. We want a clear direction soon. I want to feel that intensity again soon. And without realizing it, you try to skip steps. But that's not how the process works. This type of change, don't respond hastily, because it's not about arriving somewhere. It's about becoming someone. And that requires inner time, assimilation time, time for reorganization, stabilization time. And when you try to speed up, you don't evolve any faster. You're just creating more noise. He gets distracted again. You fill yourself up again with things that no longer make sense. He acts again before he is aligned, and that takes you right away from the point where the transformation was happening. Therefore, there is a balance here. It's not about standing still, but it's not about forcing movement either. It's about supporting the process. With presence, it's about recognizing when something truly makes sense and act from there. Not from anxiety, not because it's urgent, but of clarity, and that changes the rhythm. You stop living on impulse and begins to live in consciousness. What is being born within you doesn't need noise to be real, and perhaps that's the most important part of all. You don't need something big to happen to validate what's happening inside you. Because of the change you are experiencing, it doesn't depend on applause. It doesn't depend on recognition. It doesn't depend on immediate results. She is an intern, and that's why silent, but that doesn't make her any less of a person. Make it more real, because everything that truly changes, change first where no one sees it, and only then does it start to appear. So, if at that moment, your life hasn't changed on the outside yet, but you feel that inside you're not the same anymore, this is not a delay. This is a foundation being built, and the base doesn't show up, but it supports everything that comes after.